Good evening, everyone. I am your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to the second edition of our bi-monthly news crossover with one of the more informative programs in media, Left Reckoning. We've done cross streams with the Left Reckoning fellows before, but we decided it is always so much fun and informative that we needed to make it a regular occurrence. Please note that there are links in the description for those of you that are new to each channel. Please subscribe to both. If you're unfamiliar with Matt and David, subscribe to Left Reckoning. It's a very great show. I love it. I learned a lot from it. Sometimes there's a cross-guest thing as well. Additionally, if you feel inclined and have the means, please consider becoming a patron. Both of us offer exclusive content to our patrons, and this helps us remain independently, and more importantly, it prevents us from selling out. Speaking of selling out, Matt and David, as well as us here at TIR, have new merchandise available. There should be links in the description to their merch store as well as ours at thisisrevolutionpodcast.com. And probably the biggest news of the day for me is that today is my eldest's 24th birthday. Jayla Miles is 24 today. I cannot believe Lady Jason is growing up so much. So please give a shout out to Junior, turns 24 today. That being said, let's bring in the news crew today. Sorry for the delay. I forgot. I'll take the L on this. I forgot to upload the new show theme. It's unfair. As the Left Reckoning guys are streaming this on their channel, it is unfair that they have to put our intro. It's a group thing. It's a group thing. So we must have a group intro. Still did all the music for them. That being said, let me bring in the man of the Mau Mau Hour. Last night we had a great episode of our once a month TIR presents the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert. Was the 70s the pivotal decade? That was the question asked. And like I said in the chat for that show, if you guys have a question for Pascal and you weren't able to watch the show live, or you're not a patron, drop a question in the comments, and Pascal, he reads those comments every day. He goes in there and reads them. And he won't answer your question in the comments. I'm lying, he does read. I do, though. Please welcome Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat, peace and greetings to the audience, peace and greetings, peace and greetings. Jason Miles. Happy birthday to Jayla, your daughter.
Jayla's 24.
Great Mau Mau yesterday. Enjoyed it with M. Toussaint on the 70s as the pivotal decade. I really enjoyed it. I would suggest you guys to go check it out. Please do. And I see someone making a comment about Pascal needs to unbutton by 3. I don't do the taco meat.
I'm setting the standard. I told you guys that first and foremost, I'm having a shirt off with David Griscom. He's not going to outshirt me in the Left Media podcast world. And I've been doing a 30-day challenge. So today, I feel like Apollo Creed in one of them training montage scenes in the Rocky movie. All oiled up, running on the beach with my Italian best friend.
Jason being here with the Left Reckoning crew today. And M.
Well, let's bring in the Left Reckoning crew. Please welcome David Griscom. You know him as our good friend Norm Finkelstein would say, and he is the learned one, Matt Leck.
very personal.
Matt Lack, don't confuse with Drac.
And also the headless voice of reason, M. Toussaint.
Hello, crashing guys night.
You are
I
crashing,
really-
guys.
I don't know what it is, but I'm really feeling the energy of having you guys here today. All of you, including Jason. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in a long time. I don't know why.
2 weeks. Yeah.
It feels like it's been like the longest, but it's I'm just glad to have the vibes of so many different elements of the left in one space, and it really makes me look forward to doing this show with you guys, that we can chop it up and talk about current events and what's going on the left in a way that's productive and not gossipy and stupid.
I do really appreciate it. I mean, I'm excited to be doing more of it. I mean, we're doing this every 2 weeks now, y'all. So there's be some
Someone
good.
that likes the white
episodes
boys.
coming.
I'm excited.
A little bit. It's enough of a time for us to miss each other again, Pascal. I totally agree.
I'm excited about Griscom's bookcase and Matt's hat.
The Left Reckoning hat is sick. I can't lie.
Yeah.
I like the simplicity. I love color scheme, and as a trucker snapback hat aficionado, it's right up my alley. So
I also do love the fact that we're making all these lefties across the country have Texas on their head all the time. It's a huge victory for my people, so I'm very happy.
It's fun sneaking shit in, right? You can just like a little.
I know you were probably going to get on it, but before we get into some of these stories, should we, tease something that's coming up pretty soon?
Yes, tomorrow is the big day where the Terragram Ballroom is going to release the tickets for the live show. Give them a revolution. This is Revolution. Give them an argument, and of course, Left Reckoning will be in LA with Anna Kasparian, Nando Vila, David Bessner, Derek Varn,
Oh hell yeah!
Deep State Cuba, the David Griscom. That's just to name a few. I don't know who else is going to show up. I'm afraid they even.
That'd be Derek Bessner, and also I can confirm I'll be there. I will.
Whoa!
What?
Wow!
Yeah. There you go.
No! Are you what?
Pulling the
Nigga,
trigger. So
what?
And it's Daniel Bessner.
Daniel Bessner.
Derek
What did I say?
Bessner is Bessner and Varn.
Derek,
together to
bro.
make one
I was
doomy.
thinking Derek Davison.
Right?
One doomy conversation is Daniel Bessner and Derek Varn. Don't worry, they'll be on the same panel.
I'm excited. I don't know, I know we got a lot to get to tonight, but I do have to just recap. When we did our live show in Los Angeles, we did a lot of live shows with TMBS, and they were all amazing. They were all a hell of a lot of fun. The Los Angeles show is probably the most insane one that we ever did. Everyone got fucked up. People were passing out psychedelics to us before the show, which
People
I
that
don't know.
worked at
That
the
would have been
venue.
funny if we had accepted, but we didn't. I got Big Wosney Lambre messed up on a Texas cocktail, which has now become a little bit more popular, called Ranch Water, which is just tequila and Topo Chico.
I want one.
And he went very, very wild and did his set, and then sat in the front row and heckled us for the next 2 hours. So I'm very excited to get a lot of that crew back for this show.
So tickets go on sale tomorrow. Look, I can't stress this enough. I know Matt and Dave are going to stress this on their end. Tomorrow, the first week of ticket sales is really, really important. And if they have to add another show, we're talking about adding another show, but really, really, really important. We're also going to have, and I don't even know if David was in on this conversation, VIP meet and greet tickets.
I'm ready for it. Put them on Bill Clinton.
So those are going to be fun. I think you're going to get an autographed copy of one of Ben's books. And what else are we going to do for the VIP meet and greet? I don't know yet. Maybe we'll get you fucked up like a half hour before the show.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is you go through a bar full of people who know you, and you talk to them for a while and get progressively drunker. So that's what I'll be doing again. That seems to be the
We're
trend.
not going to have rock star meet and greets, which is like, don't fucking touch me. I
No,
had a friend. That's what she did for a living. She did meet and greets for people, and she did for what's the broad's name? Avril Lavigne. Is that her name?
okay.
One of those people. Big, one of those famous. And there was a rule: you couldn't touch her. So when you get into the pictures, like, hey, keep. I know you paid $3,000 for this experience, but
Yeah.
Oh, you got to do the hover hand.
Yeah, I don't think we want to make touching us a selling point, but
You can pet Matt's for $60. You can pet Matt's head. No, but it's gonna be a hell of a lot of fun, and also,
yeah, it is.
I'm turning 30 on the 24th, so help me celebrate a little bit, y'all. Show up in Los Angeles. I know, don't want to announce too early, but we're also thinking about a couple other locations too. So if Los Angeles feels a little far, don't be too worried. We'll be coming to a town near you very soon.
But LA is going to be fun. Terragram Ballroom, October 23rd. We will have all the information. I'll even, you know what? I'll post the flyer online. I don't think that's a problem. It's just the link for the tickets won't be out until tomorrow morning. So I'm super stoked for that. I'm even going to we're going to America tomorrow to get my son turns 4 Tuesday. My daughter, so I'm going to see my son and my daughters. Have to get them like presents, but I'm going to cross the border, and I do want to go by the ballroom and like take pictures and see the name.
Rare to hear Jason. I'm going to America tomorrow.
I caught that too.
That's like me when I leave Texas.
Dude, y'all live in America, man. You don't have the same problems as me, where your water just goes out.
Later.
But I do want to get into these news stories. David Griscom.
All right. Well,
you wanted to discuss what? And look, here's the thing. Mexico, just so you know, all windows are closed. That's why I'm hot in here, because we're talking about Mexico. And we usually don't talk about Mexico here unless we talk about what a fine country it is. There's no drug problem here. Cartel schmartel. These aren't the droids we're looking for. But you're talking about my home state now. And AMLO has nationalized the country's lithium reserves. What does this mean for Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pop up this article that I have for us, I want to talk about it a little bit because it hits at a few different things, and I definitely want to get the rest of the crew's opinions on this. But this is just what yesterday came out. Mexico creates state-run lithium company to go live within 6 months. Mexico, which nationalized lithium resources in April, has created a state-run company to run the metal. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador said in a decree issued in the National Gazette Tuesday afternoon. The company will be called Litio para Mexico, or Lithium for Mexico. The decree read, and will begin operations within the next 6 months. So this is a follow-up story to something that was very huge that AMLO did earlier this year, where he nationalized the lithium supplies of Mexico. And this is very important, going on a theme that I've been on for a while. We're just talking about what a green future is actually going to mean and look like for normal working class people. Obviously, lithium is very important, particularly for its role in creating car batteries for electric vehicles. And this is a very, very positive development in Mexico. Now, there's a few things that go into this, right? One, AMLO saying we're not going to let private companies come into Mexico and profit off of our natural resources, which is incredibly correct and brave. And in a second, I'll put up some of our friends at the Council on Foreign Relations who have a lot of problems with AMLO's policies here. But this is something that I think in the United States, across the globe, we should be seeing more of, which is recognizing that these are going to be the resources of the future, and that we should be taking those under public ownership to utilize them best for public control. I think about this a lot as a Texan, right? Because in Texas, the system that was inherited from the Spanish meant that all mineral rights were owned by the state.
Mhm.
And in Texas, in like the 1880s, 1890s, they actually abolished that system. And I just sometimes dream and think about what a system of we would be having in Texas if the state government actually had control of all the oil reserves in Texas when the oil boom happened. I think that taking control of this under public ownership is very, very crucial. One, so that that benefit can go to the working people in that society, and two, so that you don't end up having private corporations basically being able to come in and take control and profit off of those systems. In Mexico, especially, it's very, very key and crucial because that is a country that has been battered by international trade and global capitalism. AMLO has been waging a historical fight. And just right quick, we know who AMLO is, right? AMLO is a progressive kind of nationalist, not a socialist. I think that's very important to recognize.
Thank you for making that distinction.
But AMLO's role in the kind of global system means that American corporations and the American rich are very, very much against him. AMLO earlier this year tried to do a lot to try to bolster the state-run electric system in the country, and met with fierce resistance, not only from the rich in Mexico, but also a lot of American-funded think tanks that are located right here in Houston, Texas. And he's been fighting against this system. And again, you have to remember, as Jason could probably speak more well to than I can, how right-wing and anti-democratic the Mexican system has been for so long. And AMLO reintroducing democracy, particularly popular democracy to the people, has been a very, very beneficial thing, in my opinion. And we have Kurt Hackbarth on the program Left Reckoning a lot, a good friend of ours. And he's always having to walk this fine line, which there are left criticisms to make of AMLO, right? There are, no doubt about it. But we have to spend most of our time defending him because how fervent and how insane the right-wing criticisms of him are. If you don't mind putting this up for me, Jason, quick.
Of course.
This is a piece in Council of Foreign Relations in May 9th of this year, responding to AMLO nationalizing lithium in the country, right? So again, think about what that means. AMLO saying, here are our private reserves. We're going to actually take those and use those for the people. Here's how it's being covered. It's first published in Bloomberg, but the Council of Foreign Relations happily republished this. AMLO's lithium grab and war on green energy will hurt North America. By reasserting state control over Mexico's natural resources, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador is again slowing the nation's economic recovery and its potential for longer-term growth. What he means by that is the ability of private capitalists to be able to profit off of the natural resources of Mexico, which, as you know, Jason, is a country that has been experiencing pretty significant drought over the past few years, right? But it's also a country
out right now, yeah.
But is also a country that actually has globally some of the best and most consistent water reserves in the world. Mm-hmm. So why are they experiencing a drought? It's because private corporations that create sodas and beers that then get exported to the United States and all these other places have first rights to that natural resource. So when they're talking about slowing, they're talking about slowing the kind of private profits of certain individuals. As sad and predictable as his actions may be, however, their damage will extend beyond Mexico's borders, affecting the North American continent's ability to shorten and strengthen its supply chains, address the damaging effects of climate change, and regulate migration. It's just an extremely, extremely nasty way that a lot of these kind of right-leaning organizations try to frame this fight against climate change as the necessary precondition to dealing with it means private profit at the expense of the people. I think what AMLO is doing in Mexico by nationalizing those reserves, by creating a state-run company to mine those reserves is a damn good thing, especially when you remember folks like Elon Musk, who tweeted very famously after the coup in Bolivia, we will coup whoever we want, right?
Mhm.
Like there is a demand from this kind of green capitalist class to come into countries, take their natural resources. And I think it's a damn good thing that AMLO is in power in Mexico right now so that he can defend those natural resources and see that the profits of that system go to the people. But I'm curious, if you all have any other thoughts on this.
Mexico is, I think, a little more complex because there is a lot of private business that comes down here. Like all the gas stations are Pemex. Definitely let American multinationals come down here. I'm going to go get gas a little later at the Chevron in Puerto Nuevo. That being said, they have a little more control. They are kind of trying to open up more to outside businesses. And then what we're seeing in the States, kind of moving away from, just things like controlling resources, but the way he is attacking crime is kind of what we would want to see, as far as not just coming in and locking everybody up. So recently there was a rash of violence in different parts of Mexico. Like Juarez had a bunch of violence. I actually contacted some friends over there. They said they left the country and went to El Paso to chill for a minute. Came back while things died down. Some things blew up down even here where I am in Rosarito, and I think they blew up like 5 or 6 of us. There's like a 7-Eleven chain called Oxxo that we have here, and they blew a bunch of those up. And there's multi beefs going on, and looking on Mexican Twitter, a lot of the complaints were at the government for not being tough on crime. So where I live is different than Mexico City, right? It's a country, it's not a state, right? So Mexico City people are a little more in tune with the goings on of the government. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of us here are here illegally. I'm not gonna lie.
I won't
so it's an interesting, like, talking to people about politics down here is different than if you've ever spent time in like Mexico City or even anywhere in what I call mainland. They call it the South here, mainland Mexico. They're like very, very different conversations, because also those are cats. Like I get temporarily hit with water, as you were saying before about water being a huge resource here. All of the companies, I forget if it's Monterrey or not where they're located, those are all like American companies.
For sure.
That are taking a lot of the water, so people have water rations. So mine is sporadic. There is no rhyme or reason. They'll just shut off my water for sometimes days at a time. There's literally a time limit that people have, and an amount of even clean water they can get, because we all have to buy our drinking water. So it's a complex situation that the guys, and I hate just saying complex and leaving it like, oh, just leave it alone. But I think people have to keep in mind he's not coming in from a real clean situation either. There's been decades of corruption.
So this is not to try to accuse AMLO of being part of the pink tide in Latin and South America would be an incorrect assessment from your perception, David. Is that he is left of center, but he's not as left as, say, someone like a Lula, or he's not, like a Evo Morales type. You wouldn't really put him in the same category.
He's also a lot closer to him.
I don't think he's an Evo Morales. Lula's a little bit more complicated, because I think Lula has made a conscious decision in government to govern from a certain position that might be different from his perspective, if that makes sense. Like Lula in Brazil recognized the power, I think, as we saw from the coup, like rightfully so, of like the business elite and the powerful in Brazil to try to, benefit the poor while also like benefiting the country as a whole, which means benefiting rich folks. AMLO, I think, I think you see it like most clearly, for example, like in what he's been doing with Biden since he's been president, not going, for example, to the complete facade and sham of the Summit of the Americas, is like that's an AMLO move, right? I think that AMLO represents a kind of like left populist politics, and that's where his strengths and limitations sort of lie, if that makes sense. So, like, he does things like nationalizing lithium. He also does things that I think frustrate some leftists, like his immigration policies and sort of coordination with the Americans on it. But beyond that, like as to how to see AMLO as a figure, like you can't read something in the United States that doesn't at one point or another describe him as a dictator, which is absolutely insane.
Incredible.
Because this is a guy who, like, Mexico has a system where you get what a long-term presidency and you don't get to run again. In the middle of his presidency, AMLO had a public referendum on whether or not he should be president, and he said, "If I lose this, I will resign." So he is trying to like reform the system in Mexico, to work more, to be more responsive to the people. And I don't know, like I would like it if AMLO was like a full dyed-in-the-wool like leftist socialist. Don't get me wrong, but when I see this in like the progression of history, the world's historical level, like AMLO is certainly an incredible leader of Mexico, at least in the sense of him being positive versus negative. And I think that a lot of Americans, like, Mexico is just sort of that country under us, and they don't think about the politics under it. I don't think people realize how right-wing Mexican politics has been for generations. The domination of the PRI has been absolutely devastating. And the reason that there's so much hatred that you sort of get, percolating in the United States towards him is because he is including the poor and the people of color in Mexico into popular democracy in a way that they never were under the PRI.
I mean, I will say one thing. It's definitely a lot safer right now. I mean, considering the violence that went down this past weekend. I don't know if you guys heard about that. It actually was, again, it was way more serious in Juarez than it was here, but it definitely, people died here. They literally blew up. It's like, imagine going in 7-Eleven and it just blew up. They were just, and cats were just blowing up 7-Elevens. They already caught the dude that did it, that was behind it. So there are a lot of strides to try to make the country better and try to undo what was done the administration before, but that's so hard.
But even larger than Mexico, and I know we have more stories to get to, but I want to throw this to y'all. Like, this is exactly the kind of thing. Like, a lot of times people say, like, lithium is like the oil of the future, right? This is exactly the kind of thing that you want to see developing. I will say, I think that the comparison between lithium and oil are a little bit different, because lithium is actually a lot more plentiful than I think a lot of people sometimes realize. It's obviously concentrated in a few areas, but it's not the same. It doesn't work like just on the mineral level to compare that to oil. But I think taking control of those systems right now is incredibly beneficial, because that's the first step to doing any of the kind of stuff that I think all four of us would like to see societies doing across the globe when it comes to their natural resources.
Toussaint, did you have something to add?
Just really quickly, we do have a super chat. Show it.
Ooh, super chat.
Do I have to show it, or can you get it?
My computer's a little bit slow. Maybe you can get it.
You really, you want to talk about slow computers? You literally see mine.
It's from Infinite Content.
Always good to hear from our good friend in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Did you find it, or I gotta look for it?
Also, I don't know what this cocktail is that's been up on the screen this whole time. It does not sound good, I'm gonna be honest.
What is the cocktail? Oh God, who put that? Did I do that on accident, Toussaint, or did you do that?
It's been up there the whole segment.
Wait.
I'm so sorry. I can't find it, Toussaint. My computer is just.
That's okay.
Is yours still moving that slow?
It is. The question was about whether this looks like countries like Mexico can box out companies like Tesla.
Well, I mean, that's why the the Council on Foreign Relations is saying this is slowing the nation's economy and threatening North America. Is because they're not letting pilferers like Elon Musk into the lithium reserve. So yeah, that's why these boys are upset about it. They don't give a shit about what happens to the Mexican economy. They care about what happens to American capitalists.
I think that's true. You know those world country happiness indexes? The countries that rank the highest are the ones whose natural resources are used for the people.
Are used
Or
for the
if
what?
they are used for the people of that country. Or if they're sold, then the people benefit from their sale.
And our good friend who just got popped up on the screen, Champagne Humanist, who I know, I hope they don't mind me noxing him, is a Texan, says Morena is taking over thanks to him. And that's the thing about AMLO is that he really has led to like a real opening in politics for a different kind of Mexican left-wing populist. Like it might not be the Socialist Party, Communist Party stuff that we might want. But again, spend some time learning a little bit about Mexican history and you realize how significant this is.
Good stuff.
Speaking of Mexican history, I think this is going to play great into the next story we have, which is from my good friend Pascal Robert.
Yeah, I wish this was an optimistic story about Mexico and its relationship with treatment.
I want to read a quote, Pascal, from your article in the LA Times. This was a front page above the fold in the LA Times. They say it in English, they say it in Spanish all the time, recalled Leon Simmons, a black father of four with a deep voice and a gentle manner. When they look you right in the eye and they call you the N-word to your face, that's dehumanizing. And he's talking about Mexicans.
Yeah, this story came across my timeline from actually some people who were supporters of the more nativist ADOS movement. And I found it kind of disturbing on its face because it discusses something that I've been familiar with for a long time living in South Florida, which we have a large Cuban population here. For many people who are unfamiliar with the history of Latin America and South America, they don't realize that there's actually been a long history going back to colonialism and plantation economies of black people in these spaces. And along with that, there's also a history of rather tense, racialized, frankly, just racist hostility towards black and brown communities in those communities going back centuries, to be very, very honest. One of the things that this causes is a blind side in the United States where we have this kind of binary notion of racial conflict between blacks and whites, where we have this notion that it's quote unquote only the whites that are doing the racism to the black and other brown people. Well, this story in California's largest race bias cases, Latino workers are accused of abusing black colleagues. Well, we're finding, according to the EOC, victims' allegations and employee records show that in the last decade, about a third of anti-black bias suits filed by the EOC's Los Angeles and San Francisco offices involved discrimination by Latinos. About a third involved white offenders, and a third were unspecific. So what we're seeing is that in this particular area, large numbers of black workers, particularly working class or working poor people, have been facing discrimination in temp low-wage work jobs where they're being called the N-word, facing rather brutally hostile, derogatory treatment, dealing with racist graffiti on the workspace, and very, very negative treatment. And what is really, really sad is that this kind of treatment is expanding into other workspaces, not simply in Tesla's been dealing with major cases of suits in this area, and it's spilling over into all various types of workspaces where you're having black workers dealing with Latinos. And what's becoming clear is that there is a racial antagonism developing in these communities outside the historical, positive relationships that they've had, but particularly it's worsening in the positions that are precarious in terms of the nature of the labor, particularly the labor that is temp in nature or where there is less employment protection. One of the things that, according to the articles, we find is that whenever there's been a unionized job space, the capacity of these kind of racial chauvinisms to highlight themselves have been much, much lower and have been much less able to really, really come forth. But it's really become a horrible, horrible, horrible story in that nearly every day, the one time Ontario warehouse employee said he was stunned to hear racist slurs from Latino coworkers. They said it in English, they said it in Spanish, and one time they called Leon Simmons a black father of four in a deep voice and a gentle manner. When they look at you right in the eye and they call you the N word to your face, it was dehumanizing, as Jason read earlier. 32 miles away at a Moreno Valley warehouse, it was the same story. Another black laborer, Benjamin Watkins, described how a Latino worker called him, "Hey, monkey, yeah, you," and waved a banana in her hand. A group of women burst out laughing. In America's long history of harassment and discrimination against black workers has usually involved white proprietors, and the remains the case today. And that remains the case today. But with the rapid growth of the Latino population, now at 19% of the U.S. and 39% in California, Latinos form the majority in many low-wage workplaces, and instances of anti-black bias and colorism among them is drawing new scrutiny, even as activists in the two communities forge alliances over criminal justice and economic development. One of the reasons why I find this really problematic is that this type of tension is going to be used by the anti-immigrant element that's developing in black spaces, that has been developing in the post-Trump era, to say, like, listen, we can't work with these Latinos, we can't work with these Mexicans, they're innately racist, so on and so forth. And it's going to undermine some of the work in the other areas that have been successfully breached between these two communities in terms of fighting crime and other anti-poverty measures. I think that one of the best ways to fight these kind of horrible offenses, and they are horrible and we shouldn't mitigate them, is to actually have employer-based solidarity based on trying to improve the condition of these workspaces for all workers and to diminish the actual precarity that these black and brown workers are in, to make sure that they can have a fighting chance in getting unionized protections and protections against these racialized antagonisms, and making sure that the EEOC is strong enough to challenge these racist Latinos and make sure that they don't implement these kind of tactics on black workers ever again. I'd like to hear what you guys thought.
I mean, I think, like, for David and I at Left Reckoning, like, this is an important story to cover because we covered the Elon Musk Tesla factory in Fremont plant. And, you know, that was it was
Fremont, California, just so people would know.
Oh yeah, it's a historic plant actually, but we'll, you know.
Yeah. And well, that story was easy at that point to be like, oh, this is Elon Musk, the South Africa apartheid inheritance son, coming and, you know, setting a certain culture. But I mean, as this story shows, it's a much broader phenomenon. And like, I'll just speak as like a sort of like dumb white kid from North Dakota, but like this. It's sometimes hard for me when I see these stories, like, to know, like, is this just news to someone like me or is this news to everybody? Because like growing up, the way that we looked at Mexico was like, those are, like, to be frank, like the Indians of Mexico. And now it takes like a certain kind of analysis to realize, oh, there's an indigenous population still there. Those are often people who are having to migrate. There's a settler population and slave populations from a lot of, you know, all Central Latin America, right? And so this stuff shouldn't necessarily be a surprise, but I think that's interesting what you said, Pascal, about the risk that this has in severing what in America is sort of seen as a natural alliance. I mean, my hope is that, I mean, I guess it's like it's hard to articulate this stuff, right? Like, it's still is like a public movement. I mean, maybe that's just around the corner, I guess.
I'm glad you brought up, you know, being from North Dakota, because I think most Americans, especially, you know, the bigger populations are in major metropolitan areas, so they don't understand what the Dakotas look like, North and South, especially when it comes to racism and Native Americans. And when you said there's the Indians of Mexico, like, that blew my mind. Seeing how racism towards the natives looked. And I wouldn't say it's similar here, it's just different. But there is racism towards the native population out here. There's definitely colorism to a certain extent.
Jason, I really actually wanted to hear your thoughts on this as a Californian who's from the Bay Area, who's definitely interfaced with the rising population of Mexicans and Latinos.
It's
Because
very
what I find is that there's a difference between the way Black folk in the Bay and Black folk
Yes.
in LA deal with
Yes.
these communities. There is a large tension and hostility amongst LA Black communities with the Mexican communities compared to there is in the Bay with those
very
communities.
different. It's worlds different, and a lot of it has to do with prison culture and gang culture. There's different alliances that are made. Northerners anyone can be a Northerner if you agree with their bylaws. So there's Black Northerners, Asian Northerners, white Northerners. It's very different than what you get in Southern California with like the Mexican mafia. The segregation's different in Southern California than it is where I'm from in the Bay Area. I actually grew up in a more so Latin part of Richmond, California, with a lot of El Salvadorians and Mexicans, but also there was a lot of Southeast Asians that came over from Vietnam and then Pol Pot. So the Bay Area is just a very, 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 very different beast than LA, because LA's tensions are way more historic. LA weirds me out. You know, I can't navigate through LA the way I can in even more predominantly Hispanic areas like San Jose.
Wow.
But I'm curious what y'all think about this, but like, you know, this just shows to me the limitations of I don't know what I did to trigger that, but you know, the limitations of a kind of like liberal understanding of like racial discourse that sort of permeates, you know, I think is very, very incomplete. I don't have the answer. That's why I'm like throwing it to the rest of y'all to talk about. But like, you know, I think one thing that a lot of people have been talking about, and this is a Southern example, so forgive me, but you know, there was these really incredible moments in the South, in New Orleans in particular. We saw a lot of people from like different racial groups showing solidarity with each other, like, you know, formerly enslaved poor whites and immigrants in New Orleans, particularly in like the dock working industry, when they recognized that they all had to sort of stand together and like, you know, fight against the system there. I'm curious, like, what y'all think, like the kind of way out of this, because like, I don't know, like there's a way this segment could go where like we spend a lot of time like sort of, you know, untangling like the American understanding of like Mexican heritage in this country, where it's like, you know, are you indigenous? Are you a person of color? Are you somebody who's like descendant of like Spanish immigrants, right? Which are different groups of people. I think a lot of people miss that. But I think like even more productive to our kind of politics is like recognizing that this idea that like people just on the nature of like their skin color or the way that they sort of interact with society is going to necessarily create solidarity between them versus like their class identity as people who are sort of working at like similar plants and in similar situations, like might be much more viable.
I mean, people forget about like the history of California, especially post the riots, right? Because after the Watts riots in '65, you also have the end of the Bracero program, and that caused a lot of Mexican migrant workers to kind of be stuck here because they had the ability to just, you know, walk over, you know, seasonally. And that created a new class of worker that could replace this black class of worker that's actually starting to get a lot more rights. So as LA is starting to blow up, and when I say LA, I mean the entire region, right? The modern city. It's spread out. It's massive. As these suburbs of LA and these suburbs of industry are spreading out, it was a lot of this Latin labor that took over the role that a lot of black labor had for years. So there's definitely a lot of tension. You know, no one ever put capitalism in there as a problem. There was always those people. There was an othering. You know, we always talk about it here that capitalism is going to create its others.
I mean, again, I'm just throwing things out to hear people's reactions to, but it's like I've been doing a lot of like historical research in like post Reconstruction South, and like I don't think this is novel. I think we probably all agree here. Reconstruction was a failed project and should have went much further than it did, right?
No doubt.
But one of the things that was really beneficial to the class, and I'm not trying to be technical about this, but I think it's important to recognize that like a new class arose in the South post Reconstruction that took advantage of this system. But because Reconstruction failed and because the South was so like economically devastated, it was very, very easy for like white supremacist factions and groups like that to say like, oh, well, it's the freedom of these people that is creating your misery. Versus the fact that like, well, the federal government after that like all the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff that like was decimated during the Civil War in the South should have been rebuilt and should have been expanded upon, created this kind of crisis. Like, I'm just curious, like, you know, what you all think about that, because in the sense of like the modern examples, because I think it's a one-on-one, right? Like we live in an economically decimated country, particularly in places like California, where like it's insane to see like the wealth that some have and the wealth that others don't. That it's like much more beneficial to the capitalist class to have, you know, Mexican workers and black workers sort of fighting amongst themselves than for all those people to recognize that like, no, it's your boss, it's the guy sitting at the top of this thing who's benefiting from all of this. And it's not to discredit or not recognize like the clashes that are happening that are just not, the clashes aren't justified, but like they're justifiable to be like upset about and angry about. But it's very, very beneficial to the boss when you see the workers fighting against each other versus when they're sort of recognizing that they're in the same position.
No doubt, absolutely. It's a really tragic case of people being short-sighted in the way they let their racial chauvinism get in the way of actually being able to unite with people who can actually take it to the boss and the employer and the capital and to improve the condition for overall the whole working class collective. Instead, people are stuck in their racial chauvinisms, and unfortunately, it's a tragedy. I mean, we see it in South Florida here all the time, and it's obviously going on in California as well. And it's something that really needs to be rooted out if we're going to have any kind of effective solidaristic politics in this country, because this kind of stuff is unacceptable, man.
You want to add something, Matt?
I have a question.
No, I think you got something up.
Yeah, go for it, Tissy.
Yeah.
Your question? Did you ask it?
Oh, heard the phrase that. Can you hear me?
You keep muting yourself.
Can't hear me.
We can hear you now.
We can hear you now, but you ask it and you mute yourself. So what is it?
No. Oh, okay. Well, I've heard that in New York City, you'll never find a closer Hispanic community.
Unity?
I don't know if you know that. Closer
unity?
Communities.
Oh, community.
Unity. Oh my God. I don't know what's going on. My computer's really slow.
Going on your end, but that's a Pascal thing. I don't know. Do you agree with that, Pascal?
The stereotypical imagery of the Black and Latino community in New York is that many of the tensions that exist in places like you see in Florida and California are non-existent, and that they tend to be closer communities. There is some truth to that, but there is still some racial tension that exists. I think it's because there has been historically a significant amount of racism faced by the particularly Puerto Rican community in New York. And also there's a large Afro-Latino population in these communities as well, where they overtly identify as Black as well. That makes them see themselves more so as Black than simply white.
Look, I'll tell you this. It's so different where y'all are from.
Hmm.
You know, the N word is thrown around a lot more freely in Latin areas where y'all are from, and it's just acceptable. Not as much. It's definitely a
Yeah.
pejorative in LA.
Oh, I think it has to
Yeah,
What
do
is
with
going on,
the
Tucson?
young lords in New York.
that's true. There's also a history of the Young Lords being a part of the
I don't
coming
know.
out of the Black
I'm
Panther
gonna restart.
Party era as well.
Is that the communities coming
She's
together on
talking.
racial lines, or was it
Something's
something
happening, so
else?
you're pausing on your end, and it's causing you to speed up everything. So I don't know if you have a pause button, just keep your button on and quit pressing it.
But generally, yes, there is a perception that there is more unity between Puerto Rican communities and African Americans, and there is to some extent, to a large extent. Uh, but there is racial tension that exists in these communities as well. But it's definitely a lot better than what you see in say South Florida or Mexico, or excuse me, in California.
California, Mexico. I mean, there's not enough of us for them to get mad. It's literally me and like 5 Haitians in Rosarito, and they are totally cool with all 6 of us as of now. As of now, I think this one guy, Pascal. I will tell this story before I pivot to Matt. A man stopped me yesterday as I was walking back from getting food. He stops me in the street. He goes, because I had a big old. They sell 3 liters here. Diabetes not really a problem, right? And so I'm walking back with a 3 liter of soda because that's what I do. And this guy goes, "You gonna drink the whole thing?" And we start talking. He's an older Mexican dude. Got deported. That whole thing that happens to a lot of cats over some bullshit. And he tells me he's Muslim, Pascal.
Oh, okay.
He says he got converted in prison.
Okay.
I said a black dude. This doesn't sound right the way I'm describing it, but he said a black dude converted him to Islam in prison. Had this long talk with me because he was like, he goes, "I don't see too many." I was like, "Black people." Yeah. But yeah, it's we don't have too many racial tensions here in Mexico. It's a beautiful place. There's no problems. Don't listen to David Griscom. AMLO's great. There's no cartels.
It's a utopia.
Leave journalists alone. Matt, you didn't send me a news story.
I
Because
did.
you were going to surprise us.
No, I did. Gene just forgot to put it in the initial email.
Oh, damn.
It came up in a follow-up.
Oh, those
Damn.
Brits, man, those Brits.
That's all right though. I've made a slideshow, so we can. I'm going to share that with you now.
Okay, did you put it up? Oh, there it is.
So yeah, this is sort of my favorite theme to talk about. But everyone will be familiar with this meme from what I'm blanking on the show. I think you should leave.
Oh my God, he admitted.
Right. So we're going to go through a few examples of that today, where basically the ruling class is elaborating how they're going to oppress everybody else. Here's an example from a book from Peter Limbaugh. This is from a book called Red Round Globe Hot Burning, and this is by a guy named Reverend Joseph Townsend, who was a contemporary of Malthus. It says, "Hunger will tame the fiercest animals. It will teach decency and civility, obedience and subjugation to the most perverse. In general, it is only hunger which can spur and goad the poor on to labor, yet our laws have said they shall never hunger. The laws, it must be confessed, have likewise said they shall be compelled to work, but then legal constraint is attended with much trouble, violence, and noise, creates ill will, and never can be productive of good and acceptable service, whereas hunger is not only peaceable, silent, unremitting pressure, but as the most natural motive to industry and labor, it calls forth the most powerful exertions and, when satisfied by the free bounty of another, lay lasting and sure foundations for goodwill and gratitude. The slave must be compelled to work, but the free man..." Oh, sorry, I was hearing myself. "The slave must be compelled to work, but the free man should be left to his own judgment and discretion should be protected in the full enjoyment of his own, be it much or little, and punished when he invades his neighbor's property. So that's a good example. There's another example going around in the context of our student loan debate, where this was flagged by John Schwartz, but this is from a 2000 book called Vietnam and Other American Delusions. It says later in 1970, Roger Freeman, a key educational advisor to Nixon, then working for the re-election of California Governor Reagan, spelled out quite precisely what the conservative counterattack was aimed at preventing. Quote, "We are in danger of producing an educated proletariat. That's dynamite. We have to be selective on who we allow to go through higher education. If not, we'll have a large number of highly trained and unemployed people." The two most menacing institutional sources of the danger described by Freeman were obviously those two great public university systems charging no tuition. The University of California and the City University of New York. Governor Reagan was able to wipe out free tuition at the University of California. So now you get the theme. There's a new article by Ken Klippenstein and John Schwartz in The Intercept today. John Schwartz was the one who posted that student loan quote to Twitter. It's called Real Estate CEO, Recession Could Be Good If Unemployment Puts Employers Back in the Driver's Seat. I'll just read from a little bit here. The president of Douglas Emmett Inc., a real estate corporation worth over $3 billion and based in Santa Monica, California, said on August 22nd, corporate earnings call, that a recession could be good for the commercial real estate business if it comes with a level of unemployment that puts employers back in the driver's seat and allows them to get all their employees back into the office. The executive, Jordan Kaplan, then repeated that the thought that would be that unemployment would be up and therefore employers would be in the driver's seat to bring people back into the office, which is where they want them. And they deny it a little bit, saying that was just in response to a Citibank question asking us that, and we don't necessarily want a recession, because he did continue, it would not be pleased to go into recession. Recessions are revenue hitting activity, and if my tenants are feeling the recession, then I can't imagine how. So there's some outs there, but it is interesting just to know the different ways that CEOs think about this as they talk to bankers, right? Any conversation we're going to see, and the banker, I think that should be as public as PPP loans, and we should be able to listen to the MP3s. But Stuart McElhenney, Vice President Investor Relations of Douglas Emmett, told The Intercept Cap was merely. Let me just skip that. That's probably redundant. Keep it moving here. Equity Commonwealth Chief Operating Officer told analysts that it had seen some false starts in our portfolio. And I want to ask you guys about the return to the office push that we're seeing, because I know somebody who is currently at a job in North Dakota, and they've been fighting it successfully. They can't get them to come back. They're doing 1 day in office and the rest of the week from home. And I think I mentioned that Peter Limbaugh selection there. As a historian, he points out, there's types of enclosure. Obviously, the enclosure of native lands is very common, but to think about enclosure in the terms of another enclosure was homework, like making clothes, being brought into the factory. That was another type of enclosure where it's brought under capitalist control. And we're seeing actually a resistance to that enclosure that happened in the Industrial Revolution right now with folks. And I'm just curious if you guys have thoughts on that before I continue with some of these quotes.
Pascal, do you want to add to that?
I think it's a really dynamic way of framing it. I mean, I think that anytime you have labor rebelling from the exigencies of the employer, that's a good thing in terms of getting labor to exercise its autonomy and its ability to make choices. But I'm not surprised that capital and employers are going to use financial crises as a means to try to discipline labor. I've said this on this show. I've said that on this show for a while. That I'm very worried about this recession talk being used as a means to get the Fed to agree with capital to find means to discipline labor. And some of the citations that you're using really kind of validate my concerns.
Did you have something?
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead. Yeah, somebody else want to go?
Did you want to ask him? Oh, go ahead, Susan. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I think some of the problems that we're seeing with unhoused persons is being allowed to happen as a reminder to employees, you better stay in line. That could be you. Yeah. But I ain't going back to no office. So
I ain't going back.
Well, yeah, and that's what people are saying. It says, but then turns out employees have all the leverage and they're not coming back to the office. I just think we're going to be struggling for some time. Similar views were expressed by a Texas business executive in a survey conducted by the Dallas branch of the Federal Reserve. Inflationary wage pressure is making it hard to hire for the long term. I suspect the workforce pulls its head out of its rear when a correction or recession makes jobs scarce and people start to feel the pain or fear of not providing for their family and loved ones, assuming the government doesn't jump back into the fight and pay them to do nothing again. A great lesson you taught the workforce politicians! Exclamation point. He put, and it's always great when CEOs are exclaiming.
I mean, like really, like I think it's worth noting, like how insane the people who end up having a lot of effect on like government policy treat the measly payments that people got during the COVID crisis as like creating this crisis. As like creating crisis. I mean, like what, $2,400 total? I mean, nothing at the end of the day for what most people sort of have to deal with when it comes to their like regular expenses. They're talking about that kind of increase as creating a kind of unruly working class. Truly amazing to me. I'll throw it back to y'all, but I will just say, because I couldn't figure out my mute button a second ago. My only thing I will note about the work from home stuff, I know a lot of people prefer it, and I think it's great. But, you know, we should also be sure that in that demand, there's also the demand that the resources that you get from going to the office are provided to you at home. It can't be like you're working from home and you have to deal with like computer, internet, all that kind of stuff, like dealing with that, because that is a like a work cost that the owner of the company should be providing, that I think some companies do, especially, you know, larger ones. But I think a lot of people have been sort of put in this position where they also have to outfit themselves to have a perfectly working office at home, which is a ridiculous thing to ask that workers sort of pay for themselves. I just know this because, like, in my early days doing construction, like the story that turned me into a leftist was like one of my bosses was trying to make me buy my own boots to pour concrete. And they were like $150, and I had accepted that up front because I didn't know any better. And all my coworkers on the job site were like, "Bro, you shouldn't be paying for that shit. Your boss should be paying for that." And they all said, "We will refuse to work until you pay for that kind of thing." I just bring that up because I think that that's something that is oftentimes missed in this. That like, just because a lot of people are very passionate about the idea of being able to work from home, you shouldn't also accept on top of that having to pay work costs on top of that transition.
Agreed. I think if I have to go to work once a week in the office, there should be a bidet there. So like, let's upgrade the office too, because I have one and I don't really want to go to a place that doesn't have one.
Sounds like you don't work in tech. There you go. Gotta get out of working for Left Media, Toussaint, and work in tech.
That's true, right?
There's a little person that spits the water right into your bum.
I want one with the dryer.
That's another little person. That actually have to pay for that one. True story.
True story.
We did have people when I was at Square that actually made smoothies for you. Like they made fruit and vegetable healthy smoothies for you, and no one said hi to them. It's like, oh god, like they're real people. It's not a machine. Jeez. You can say hi.
At least the bidets are automated.
The bidets were automated because who the hell wouldn't want an automated bidet? Only Twitter had the ones with the little people in them because that was a bigger company. It's funny because you guys think I'm joking. Do you go to that executive washroom in Twitter? That's how they get everybody to forget their politics at the door. Yes. That and a free MacBook.
Ooh.
That's all it took. That is all it took. And on that dark note, I would like to thank you all for listening to this program, and of course, thank Matt and David for coming on. Hope you all enjoyed the show. This is going to be a bi-monthly affair. Again, if you haven't done it already, please hit the like button. That helps us get these valuable conversations higher in the YouTube algorithm. Also, hit subscribe. It's free, and it's so helpful for the growth of left media in general. Before we close out tonight, I would like to do a bit of an update on a news story that I mentioned a few weeks ago on our inaugural show. Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill that would allow Californians to vote on creating safe injection sites for intravenous drug users. California, like much of America, is dealing with a horrible drug problem that is causing daily overdose deaths, mainly in the vulnerable unhoused population. These sites would help curb much of the loss of life, but the governor cited vaguely that there would be unintended consequences if these sites were to be built. While I voiced my concerns about what I felt were unintended consequences, I don't think the governor and I share the same issues. Property crime, petty theft, and even some violent crime has caused politicians in the so-called blue cities to pivot to conservative measures, quelling the roar of outraged constituents and trying to mitigate the damage they see done by diversion programs that actually keep people out of jail. It's a return to third-way tough-on-crime legislation that gave us the Omnibus Crime Bill in 1994. While I don't believe there will be federal legislation anytime soon like we saw in the 90s, I do think democratically run blue cities are facing a crisis of legitimacy, and they don't know how to handle it. There is a very thin line between justice and vengeance. It's a tightrope I know I walk quite often. Just because I have certain set of political positions, it doesn't numb my emotions. I worked and lived with the homeless for years. It's rough. It's not fun. I felt as if we all were at the bottom of society's dumpster, the gross part that no one dare touch, that dirt that gets up under your fingernails. And there's one story that came to mind that I'd like to bring up when we talk about the tightrope, the line that we walk between vengeance and justice. Because there's one question that I've been asking on this show since I started doing it 3 years ago. It's just an audio-only podcast. And that is, what does justice look like? I don't know. Cornel West says it's what love, was it love in public? Justice is what love looks like in public. Yep. But, you know, without all the flowery, beautiful language, I think that's a wonderful sentiment. I want to tell this quick anecdote. I worked in one of the emergency shelters during COVID, and one of the people in the shelter was a woman that had 2 children, and she was in a hotel room with another woman. She kind of snuck her way in there that had a child as well. And the shelters weren't perfect. You know, I do believe SRO housing is a great way to look at tackling homelessness. That's something that's going on where David lives in Austin. I know that's a big deal, turning hotels into houses. SRO means single room occupancy.
But it's not a solution, just saying.
No. But I just want to throw this out here. So this woman had 2 children. One was about 12, one was about 6. And they lived with another woman that had a child that was 5. And these kids kind of had their run of the place, if you will. And whenever I was on, and my shift was about 2 p.m. to about 1 in the morning, these kids would actually come hang out with me at night. Their moms just kind of let them run. And the woman that had the 2 children, her children were a little more difficult to deal with. When we started doing the schooling program, I found out that her older boy had been out of school for almost 6 years and was reading at a 2nd grade level. And I actually saw one day the little boy beg his mom not to leave at night, because she would leave at night and do sex work, and to watch a little boy cry and beg his mom not to leave at night is a hard thing to watch. So I was not the biggest fan of this woman, and she was just difficult to the kids in general. You can't really stop people from doing things like hitting their kids in front of you. And do you really want to call CPS on everybody? They're just another long arm of the law at the end of the day. So this woman's mother was in the facility too. And one day a new gentleman started working with me, and part of our job was to hand out food for mealtime to people that couldn't make it into the lobby where we would give out food. So as we're delivering food, we get to their room and they're all in their room, grandma, daughter, and the kids, right? And this new dude that's working with me knows the grandma. He's an older Mexican cat. And he says, "Oh, hey, girl, I ain't seen you forever." He's being real cool about it, right? You don't want to embarrass anybody. No one likes being in a homeless shelter, especially when you see somebody you know. And he looks at me and goes, "I'm going to tell you something." And we walk back, and he had been telling me stories about his life. He was a drug user. He was a gangbanger. He did all the horrible things. He actually killed somebody. He actually killed his fiance and served several years in prison, turned his life around, that whole story, and is working in services to try to help people out. Takes me aside, he tells me a story. He says, "Man, that old lady in there," he goes, "me, her, and her husband before he died, man, we used to fucking shoot heroin. We used to rob stores. We used to do all that shit. And you know what? That little girl was in the car the whole time." He goes, "It's the first time I've seen that little girl since she was 3 years old. She came with us for all these capers we were doing, all the ODs. She was around that." And it was at that moment that it really hit home that everyone's a victim. Violent crime sucks. I have had to get women out of violent situations. But even the perpetrators of those violent situations were victims at some point as well. I am extremely sympathetic to victims. I myself have been a victim of violent crime. But in that moment, knowing that story and then starting other programs trying to help men deal with their violent past and hearing all the stories, you start to learn everybody is a victim. I do not know the perfect way, but I do know tough on crime legislation, shutting down things like safe injection sites is not the way. And on that note, is there anything you guys want to say? Matt and David, guys want to add anything to anything?
No, I just do very much appreciate spending time with y'all, and I'm looking forward to doing more in the future.
For sure. It's great.
This taco meat is a reckoning.
And come see us in the City of Angels, y'all.
Yeah, come to the show, guys.
Yes.
Now, dude, now that Matt's gonna be there, this is gonna be pretty sick. I actually think you guys should all come to Baja afterwards, and
I'll explore the options. I'm pretty open to it.
we get down and Matt, are you a vegetarian?
No.
That is a good answer.
From North Dakota.
You can't do that on left record. No, you could be a vegetarian if you want to, man.
No, this is
Eating
gonna be
buffalo.
fun.
Guys, they grew up eating buffalo meat, man.
Oh man, buffalo burgers are
If he found a buffalo in North Dakota,
I knew a guy who had buffaloes on his property. Actually, branded them, sell them, had some buffalo burgers from that thing. So
very, very dense the buffalo burger is.
it's delicious.
Well, we won't have buffalo burgers here in Mexico, but I can guarantee it might not be yours. And on that note, thank you, Matt and David. This is so much fun. LA, tickets go on sale tomorrow, October 23rd, Terragram Ballroom. Give them a revolution. We are out. Now we are. Nope, we're back.
Wow, that was it.
Nope, now we're out. Promise.